Hi, this is Becky Spain, your lecturer for Excellence in Business Communication. This lecture will cover Chapter 1, Professional Communication in a Digital, Social, and Mobile World. You might want to follow along with your book as we go through this PowerPoint presentation. I won't be reading these slides to you word for word, but I do want to point out some information that I hope will enhance your learning process. Feel free to read through the PowerPoint slides as you read this chapter. It should help you to pick up on the main concepts and help prepare you for the information that you'll be responsible for in this course. The first couple of slides go over what your objectives are that you'll be learning in this chapter. You can review those at your leisure. We will start by looking at what information we'll be covering that pertains to learning objective number 1, and that is to explain the importance of effective communication to your career and to the companies where you will work. When you compare your work history and what it's going to be going forward in your life to what was the work history of your parents, your grandparents, you're going to find that they're quite a bit different. And one of the reasons is because the very nature of employment is changing. There's a growing number of independent workers and loosely structured virtual organizations, meaning there's no bricks and mortar, there's no actual physical building. So there is an opportunity to do more individual project work, or to have short-term contracts rather than being a full-time hired employee working 40 hours a week with benefits. But regardless of whether you are working in a traditional 8 to 5, Monday through Friday job with benefits, or whether you are a temporary or a project worker, one thing is for sure: whenever you're looking for a job, the competition is stiff, and what your employer is looking for is a long list of skills. But the number one skill that most employers discuss and that they're looking for is a strong ability to communicate, both verbally and through writing. Learning strong communication skills is going to make you more employable both today and in the future. Communication is defined as the process of transferring information and meaning between senders and receivers using one or more forms of communication such as written, oral, or even visual and electronic media, which we'll be looking at in this course. The essence of communication is sharing data, sharing information, sharing insights, and even sharing inspirations. Improving your personal communication skills may be the single most important step that you can take in having a successful career. Even great ideas won't go anywhere unless you're able to communicate them clearly and effectively. As you take on roles and work up into leadership and management roles, communication becomes even more important. If you learn to write well, learn to speak well, even learn to listen well, which is also a critical skill, you'll recognize the most appropriate ways to communicate in any situation, and you'll gain a major advantage that will serve you throughout your career. Aside from personal reasons, communication is also critically important to you because it's important to the company and the company that you're going to work for. Effective communication helps businesses in numerous ways. It takes a strong communicator to be able to have influence on what's happening in the workplace or even in the marketplace. If you want to have productivity and better problem solving, it takes good communication skills. To be a part of a team that's making effective decisions to drive the business forward, or even trying to help employees to be engaged in what's happening in the workplace. All of this takes good communication skills. So what makes business communication effective? Well, effective communication strengthens the connections between a company and all of its stakeholders. Now, who are stakeholders? These are any group that's affected by the company's action. This would be employees and customers, anybody who owns a part of the company, such as a shareholder, anyone who supplies the company, even the neighbors that live in the area where the company is, in the community at large, and even the nation. These are all considered to be stakeholders. To communicate to all of these stakeholders effectively, you must focus on information that's practical, that's factual, that's concise, that's clear, and that's persuasive. As we go through this course, we're going to look at ways that you can accomplish just that. Learning objective number 2 talks about what it means to communicate as a professional in a business context. Now, I know that a lot of you don't have a lot of experience in the business world just yet, so meeting the expectations of a professional environment might require some adjustments. Every company has their own culture and their own way that they communicate, and it'll take a while whenever you get a job with a new company to figure out what the culture of communication is within that company and learn how to function within it. But the best skill that you can bring to any company, regardless of what its culture is a professional communications skills. The skills that you want to bring to your job would be things like striving to be excellent, being dependable and accountable, being a team player, demonstrating a sense of etiquette, making ethical decisions, and then also being positive in your work outlook. So let's begin by looking at the very first one on this list, which is striving for excellence. If you look at your book on page 6, there are 2 examples of emails, and you need to take the time to actually review this and look through this. This will help you with your homework assignment, but this will also help to make a point of taking the time to make sure that what you're communicating is effective. It's written in such a way that your audience can understand what's going on, and it will help you to get the responses that you need. So there's nothing more frustrating than sending out an email to a group of your coworkers and either trying to get information to them or request a reply, and then 3 days later, no one has responded to you. You didn't get the information that you needed from your coworkers, and you're stuck on the project that you're working on. You can't move forward. Well, chances are what you wrote was not clear. The readers didn't understand either that you needed a response, or when you needed the response, or how you needed the response. So little mistakes that we often make in creating emails, which is one of the main ways that many businesses work between team members. You want to make sure that you're clear in the information that you've listed. So on your subject line, make sure that the subject line is very specific to what it is that you need for a response from your email. And then as you construct your email, make it in such a way that that first paragraph is pretty plain for them to understand what the email is about and what they need to do. At the top of page 6 is an example of a poorly put together email, and then at the bottom of the page there is an email that is what you want to look for when you're writing this. So read through this, look at the 2 differences, and then apply this as you're working through your homework exercise that you'll do for this week. Next, we're going to look at elements of professionalism. The chart on page 7 takes you through 6 elements of professionalism. What does your employer expect from you? Well, they expect you to be the best. They expect you to excel towards excellence. They expect you to be dependable, to be where you're supposed to be, and to deliver what you've been asked to deliver and that you're being paid to do. They're asking you to be a team player. We often refer to that as playing nice in the sandbox. Be respectful to those that you work with and work for. Be clear in your communication. Be ethical. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. And be the best. So what does your employer expect from you? Well, they're paying you to do a job, and chances are they expect quite a bit. In regard to communications, they expect you to be able to organize your ideas and your information and to express those in a coherent way that is persuasive. They expect you to listen up to others as they share their ideas and give input, and to communicate in diverse situations. Diverse situations can mean a lot of different things, from the differences in the way that you are expected to communicate. If you're sharing ideas with your peers at a meeting, and how you're expressing yourself and how you're communicating is going to be different than if you're giving a report to the board or to your bosses. So they want you to be able to be effective in a wide variety of situations and settings. The list continues. Using communication technologies Chances are you're probably better at that than I am. I usually find that if I have questions, I usually ask my children because they usually know better than I do on technology. So I'll probably give you a break on that and just assume that you probably are pretty strong there. But one of the things that communication and using technologies often causes an issue with, and that's using standard grammar and spelling. So we've kind of gotten lazy in our texting about using punctuation and abbreviating words and spelling them out. In the business world, it's critical that you use full sentences with punctuation and capitalization. This is going to be required of you in all of your business communications. If you're ever tempted in an email or in something that you're writing up to abbreviate, shorten a word, use slang, you need to stop and not do that. That is not part of the business culture, and that's one of the main mistakes that I see new graduates, and whenever they come into the business environment, make that kind of a mistake. So take the time, write the sentence out, use appropriate grammar, punctuation, and spelling. There's lots of tools available to you on your your computer, so use your grammar check, use your spell check, and make sure that anything that you turn in, you're making an excellent presentation with. And the last one on this list, I also want to take just a second to address, and that's managing your time and your resources. It may be that you are a little bit more laid back, or that you are used to having professors who are a little bit more laid back, and they're more willing to accept late assignments. You let them know, I'm going to be late on this, can I turn this in late? Those types of things. In the business world, that's frowned upon. And you're going to find that if you want to be thought of as an excellent employee and to progress your way through getting new assignments and new positions and new opportunities, you need to manage your time and your resources. If your boss says, I need this on my desk by 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock by Tuesday morning is when your boss wants that, and not 8:30 and not on Wednesday or Thursday. And it's really critical that you follow those timelines. And if your boss tells you he needs a 2-page report, then you give him a 2-page report. If he says 6 pages, give him 6 pages. This is not up for negotiation. Whenever in the business world you're given guidelines, you need to follow those guidelines, and you need to follow them in a timely manner. This next slide we kind of hit on just a second ago, but in the formal communication network, ideas and information flows along the lines of command in 3 directions, either downward, upward, or horizontally. So downward would be anybody who is in a position below where you are. Upward is anybody who's in a position above where you are, and horizontally would be your peers that have the same level of responsibility as you. So let's say that you're a manager. Horizontal communication would be your communication to your peers who are also managers. Your upward communication would be maybe to the vice president or the president of the organization, and then downward would be maybe a analyst or an assistant or an associate that has a position that doesn't carry the same level of responsibility that you do. Learning to communicate upward and then horizontally and then downward is an important part of the communication process. Giving a report to your boss is not going to be the same. It's not going to have the same tone and the same structure as whenever you're giving a report to people who work for you or even to your peers. So this is part of an audience-centered approach, which we're going to talk about quite a bit throughout this entire book. That is making sure that you have your audience of who you're talking to in mind as you prepare your words or your presentations, so that you're talking with them in mind rather than with who you are in mind. There is also what's called an informal communication network, which is sometimes referred to as the grapevine or the rumor mill. This is communication that occurs outside the formal network. Sometimes social media can play a huge role in that, and one of the points I want to make about the informal communication network is never to underestimate it and its power to influence. You would be wise to try to figure out how to utilize the informal communication network to help you to move forward goals, projects, and ideas, because it has a lot of strength. Even though it doesn't necessarily have a formal role in your organization, there's always an informal network and informal leaders in that network that can help to move things along. So my husband he's a manager at the hospital, and he has informal leaders in the hospital. Whenever he needs something done, he will talk to the informal leaders, who will then talk to their peers and move projects along to completion. And it's a way to get things done that's outside of the formal process. Can be very effective. On page 9 of your book, it gives you a formal communication network. Take a second and review this. Every organization has their own flow in their communication network as to how information flows from one point to another. Whenever you get into an organization and you're working for them, you need to come to understand what the formal communication process is, so that you can work within that to make sure that you are communicating in a way that's expected. So some companies have open door policies, and entry-level employees are welcome to talk to vice presidents and presidents, but some organizations, the information has to flow in a certain pattern. So you need to become aware of what that process is for the company that you work for, and then make sure that you adhere to it. All right, so now let's move on to our audience-centered approach. I find that this is one of the most important elements of this entire book. So if you only learn 1 or 2 or 3 things in this entire course, and I hope you learn many more than that, but this is one of the things that I hope that you will come to understand and learn how to apply. And that is adopting an audience-centered approach. So it's not really about you and how you would put something together and say it, but rather it's looking at your audience and where are they and what do they need to hear. So let's say that you're in charge of a project to try to increase graduation rates, and you are going around and you're speaking to different groups of people. Now, you're going to probably put together a basic presentation that's going to cover information, but you're going to need to adjust that depending on who you're talking to. Because if you're talking to a group of junior hires or even high schoolers, the information that you're going to present and how you're going to present it and what's important to them and what they want to hear in order to get behind the project is going to be different than when you're talking to parents or other business leaders in the community. What you're going to present, what you have to say about that project in order to try to get them on board, you're going to have to present different points of view and different information. So that is your audience-centered approach. Anytime you ever give a report or make any type of presentation, write an email, write a letter, or even something as simple as sending a text, you need to think about who are you sending this to, who's my audience, and what information do I need to present so that they can get this, can understand this, can grasp this from where they are, what's their point of view, rather than about me and how I just say it, this is how I am and this is just how I say it. You're going to be much more successful, not only in the business world, but in your personal life as well, if you stop to think about who you're talking to and where they are and their point of view and how you need to say it in order for people to be able to understand it based on who they are as your audience. All right, so let's move on to learning objective number 3, which is to describe the communication process model and ways social media are changing the nature of business communication. So let's look at the basic communication model. All right, so doing the communication as a process, you can identify and improve on your skills that you need to be more successful. So let's look. First of all, the sender has an idea. Then you encode that idea in a message, hopefully being audience focused. Then you're going to produce that message in a medium. How are we going to give this message out? Are we going to do it in an email? Are we going to do it verbally? What is the method? Then you're going to send it through the channel. The audience receives the message. Then the message is decoded by the audience. The audience responds to the message. And then a critical part of the communication process is when the feedback comes back to you after you've delivered that. In receiving feedback, remember that your receiver might give you that feedback verbally, but it can also be nonverbal, like a hand gesture, a facial expression, or signals, or it might be verbal. So in looking at this basic communication model, I'm sure that you can see that there's lots of opportunities for there to be barriers in the communication model. There could be noises or distractions. Maybe the person that you're trying to talk with or share this thought with is multitasking and they're only half listening, or they're doing something else while they're reading your text message. Other things going on, other text messages coming in or other emails coming in, they're going to draw this person's attention away. There's all kinds of filters that are happening, technological filters, human filters, people getting up, moving around, things happening, drawing the person's attention away, and these can all cause barriers. So just take a quick minute and think back to a time when you experienced a communication breakdown in a personal setting, in a personal way. So maybe you tried to explain something to your parents or to a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and what you were sharing, they just weren't getting, it wasn't coming across. Did you look back at that and try to figure out what happened, or why was that person not understanding what you were trying to get across as your idea or explaining something? Some of the barriers that could have gotten into the way could have been emotional factors. Maybe there was emotion around the information that you were trying to relay. Maybe there were cultural differences in how things were said or expressed or interpreted, or maybe there were some unidentifiable causes. There's lots of different things that can cause barriers in our communication process. It seems very ABC simple, and yet there are thousands of things that can happen when you try to take an idea and express it through a channel to a person who's receiving that and interpreting that and then giving feedback to you. Okay, so this is the basic communication model. Let's move on to the social communication model. So the basic communication model shows how a single idea moves from one sender to one receiver, but in a larger sense, it also helps represent the traditional nature of much business communication, which was primarily defined by publishing or broadcasting mindset. So in your conventional promotion, it used to be this way in business. We talk, you listen. But now, with the social model, we have more of a let's have a conversation mentality. Let's discuss this. There were lots of things that influenced this change in the social communication model to more of a let's have a conversation than we talk, you listen. But some of it has to do with just the changes in the business world. So it used to be that the boss that was at the top made the decisions, told the people down the line, his vice president, his managers, go and do this, make this happen, that I'm the boss, I'm telling you how to do it, and you're going to go and you're going to do it. That's an old business model, and what they found was that it really wasn't that effective. One person at the top is one person. It's not using the diversity, the power that comes with diversity of having an entire workforce, lots of different thoughts and opinions and ideas, a greater knowledge base. If you utilize everyone that's in the organization and let's have a conversation about what is going on, then that information can be shared and then taken up to the decision makers who can then make better decisions because they've used a broader amount of information. It also increases your employee engagement because it's much easier to work for a company that's asking for your opinion on things that are happening within the organization and what your thoughts are. You're the worker bee. You're usually the one that is out there doing the day in and the day out of the job, and you have input and feedback that they don't have. So if you can give them input from things that you're learning from doing your job, it's going to help them make better decisions and to do a better job of directing the company in the business environment. So in the hybrid model, we're seeing a blending of these two different, I'm going to tell you what to do and you're going to do it, and then let's share ideas, and using both of these to come together with ways to support the business through whether you're creating a strategic plan for the business, whether you're setting policies and procedures, whether you're supporting your customers, or whether you're working on projects. It's a more effective way to run a business. All right, so let's move along to learning objective number 4, which is outline the challenges and opportunities of mobile communication in business. Some experts predict that mobile communication will change the nature of business and our business communications even more than social media has. Many companies are coming to understand the value of integrating mobile technology into their communication. Whether they're a bank or a retail business, There's lots of opportunities to look for mobile apps and communication systems that can boost employee productivity, help companies form closer relationships with their customers and their business partners, even spur innovation in products and in services. So once again, I realize that you are the generation of the mobile phone. Everybody probably in this entire class has one and uses it constantly. So we'll review this pretty quickly because I'm sure that this is not a surprise to you. But globally, about 80% of internet users access the web with a mobile device. Mobile is now the primary internet access technology for millions of people. Our smartphones are keeping us connected 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's like one continuous long communication. This can have both positive and negative. It's great that we can stay so connected, always know what's going on up to the moment. It offers us flexibility in our work schedules because we're always able to be reached no matter when and no matter where. But it also has negative, and one of them is we can always be reached no matter any place and anywhere. It can become overload. It can drain us. It can cause us to not be focused on any one thing. It can cause stress in our lives. So we need to make sure that we manage how we use our mobile communication platform, both personally and within our business organization, that we're not overwhelming our employees or our customers with a constant barrage of conversation that never ends. I'm going to go ahead and move through these next few slides pretty quickly because I just want to make sure I'm being conscious of your time, and we've covered quite a bit of this already. But one point I did want to make as we're skimming through these slides here on mobile technology and business communication practices, and that has to do with security and privacy concerns. So one of the challenges that organizations have is that if they allow employees to be able to access business files on their personal phones, it can cause privacy or security concerns. So make sure that you are working with the organization that you work for to understand what their policies are in regard to using your phone to access business information, and that you have the security and privacy tools that they have provided for their employees, that make sure that you're utilizing those, because you don't want to become a weak link that would allow there to be a breach of security based on how you've been using the technology in your company. So moving on to our learning objective number 5, which is to look at the general guidelines for communicating using communication technology effectively. So in keeping technology in perspective, we need to look at what technology can do. It can help us to accomplish essential tasks, and it can also help us to have better interpersonal communication. Yet we also need to look at what technology cannot do. It cannot replace our personal relationships, we also need to think about the personal relationships that we have within our organization and how we can strengthen those. And having a personal relationship or developing a personal relationship is not going to happen through sending emails or text messages back and forth. There need to be those opportunities to have face-to-face conversations. So even though it takes more time, there are times when you need to step away from your computer, step away from your mobile device, walk down the hall, face-to-face, have a conversation with the person that you work with or that you work for in order to continue to build and strengthen those personal relationships. We also need to guard against information overload. So information overload happens whenever there's so much information coming to the receiver that they cannot filter out and select what they need to hear. I know that I used to do orientation for freshmen as they're coming into their first year of college, and I had so much that I wanted to tell them to help them to be able to have really successful years. But what we found out was by having long sessions filled with lots of information, that it was information overload. And at the end of the day, the new freshmen that were coming on really only heard and were able to retain a small portion of what we were telling them because it was just too much information all at one time. So we need to make sure that whether we're dealing with peers or employees or customers, that we're not presenting so much information that they can't filter out and prioritize what it is that they need to hear or do or follow up on, but to make sure that it's being presented in such a way where that doesn't occur. So one of the ways to do that is to make sure that you don't send unnecessary messages. Have you ever had a friend or a business that you've blocked on your email or on your text messaging because they just send you so much stuff and so much of it is irrelevant, and then you miss the things that are relevant because you just quit listening, or you block them completely so that you don't even get those messages? You want to make sure that that doesn't happen to you in a business format. You want to make sure that whoever you're sending information to, they're getting that, they're reviewing it, and that you're not saturating their inboxes or their emails or text messaging with information that's way too much in the way of an overload. So for this next slide, we've already talked about this. Reconnect with people frequently. In order to solve tough problems or to enrich or maintain your interpersonal relationships, you need to actually step away from the computer from time to time, walk down the hall, and talk to that person. I can't emphasize that enough. It's so easy to just get in front of your computer and try to pump out the work. We forget to do this in our day-to-day, but it will certainly enrich your business relationships and improve your productivity because you'll get better responses if you are maintaining those personal relationships with people. And then finally, we want to look at our learning objective number 6, which has to do with ethics. So the learning objective is to define ethics, explain the difference between ethical dilemma and ethical lapse, and list 6 guidelines for making ethical communication choices. So ethics are the principles of principles of conduct that govern our behavior within a society. So unethical communication would include such things as plagiarizing an idea or a product. And remember, that's like taking something that's not yours and saying that it is yours. Omitting essential information. It would just be easier sometimes to pare things down so that it sounds great, but we're omitting information that's essential that either the employee, the peer, or the customer needs. And then another would be selectively misquoting. So distorting or hiding the true content of what someone else said. That would be selective misquoting. And then there's a couple others we want to look at that would be included in unethical communication. That's misrepresenting numbers. That's a really easy thing to do, especially when you're talking about statistics, because you can pretty much say, you can pretty much make statistics say anything that you want them to say, but is it really truly representing the picture of what's happening here? Distorting visual displays or risking privacy or security, which we've talked about that a little bit already. 2 more quick points and then we'll wrap up this chapter 1 lecture. And one of the last 2 that I want to talk about is the distinguishing between ethical lapses from ethical dilemmas. So what is an ethical dilemma? An ethical dilemma involves making a choice when the alternatives aren't completely wrong or completely right, where an ethical lapse is clearly making an unethical choice. Companies should have code of ethics, which is actually a written policy as to what their company's acceptable ethics are. That's written and as an ethics guideline to help employees determine what is acceptable for that company. Every employee has a responsibility to communicate in an ethical manner. In the absence of clear guidelines, ask yourself the following questions as you create your business communication efforts. Have you clearly defined the situation, and have you been fair and accurate? What were your intentions in communicating this message? What impact will the message have on those who receive it or those who might be affected by what you're saying? Will the message achieve the greatest possible good while doing the least possible harm? While the assumptions that you've made, will the assumptions you've made change over time? In other words, will the decision that you've made today seem ethical both now and at a time in the future? And are you comfortable with your decision? Would you be embarrassed if it were printed in tomorrow morning's newspaper as a headline or spread across the internet? These are all really good questions to ask yourself when you're making decisions and questioning whether or not they're ethical. So this concludes the lecture for Chapter 1. I look forward to talking to you about Chapter 2 in the near future.